great, but if they also want to share it, they can't do it from there. So you wind up having to have a second copy somewhere. And if you have a second copy somewhere, is it a read-only copy, or do you want people who are from the neighboring community who you don't want going out over the satellite and back through the satellite to your community? You want them to hit the version that's on the internet. They might have questions, they might have contributions, they need to be able to edit the version that's online. And so we had this issue where you wind up with multiple masters of these databases, and that's very hard to do in a relational database environment. Typically the solutions for that are very expensive, very time consuming, and you get two. You get two masters. And so something like a document-oriented database where you can take the documents themselves have an ID, and CouchDB will do something like it will generate if you don't give it an ID, it will generate a UUID, which you can be pretty sure is going to be unique no matter how many places that document travels. And so you can have these documents replicate back and forth between any number of databases. So the tablet was a CouchDB instance running on the tablet, replicated the data off, make a bunch of changes, replicate them back. These databases living in different locations could be, and so you could have somebody on the internet version of a site comment and have that data get migrated up to the community where they could reply and attach maybe a video, and that would make its way back. And they wouldn't have to sit there waiting for it to upload somewhere. It would happen what they call eventual consistency. Eventually, these two things become in sync. That's a big piece of it too. This sort of document-oriented stuff, which is this NoSQL. It's quite popular. And we want to get to this kind of thing, right, where a community can ultimately stop depending on universities to hold their data for them, or governments, or this kind of thing, and start to do this themselves. And they might decide to partner up with neighboring communities using the same technology to do things like make backups of my stuff, or I've got a travel route. We share this travel route. Actually, it belongs to both of our communities, so this is a shared item in the database. So it exists in both places, and they would both have the ability to add it. I threw these in because I had to create them for a grant application for, and some of them are things that we're sort of working on and we're proposing in this application to do things like more semantic web stuff. It's well suited for semantic web. We just, the standards there work a little bit differently, and so we want to be able to create sort of a semantic web service, like a JSON service or something for reaching into this. But we also use, there's an Open Geospatial Consortium has a number of standards for bringing stuff in and out. So if you're interested in this is looking at sort of the server side. There is Java code on the server side. It's Java servlet. It's running in, we bundle it in a Jetty and we deploy it that way. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen on the server side. CouchDB sits there, and most of the client talks directly to the database. It gets its stuff. In fact, the entire client-side application is stored in the database. CouchDB is a web-enabled database with all RESTful API, and so you actually wind up fetching the whole application from the database. Also very handy for things like when I have a tablet and I'm syncing up, I'm not just syncing the data, I'm syncing the application as well. So any decisions like the schemas, the modules, all that kind of stuff can make their way onto the tablet at that time as well. So once the client application comes out and it's in the browser, it's mostly talking to this. There are a few places where it will talk to this. So for example, file uploads. And we wanted to go through a vetting process or a moderation tool, that kind of thing. These will also, we call them robots, but they watch the changes feed of the database and do things like notice that somebody has uploaded a photo, but it's the wrong file size or the wrong format or something. Go and do kind of like what YouTube does. It'll go and take a photo or a video or an audio file. It'll convert it, compress it if it has to, change its size, whatever. It'll keep the original, but create a version that's uniform with all the rest of the site, depending on whose atlas it was and what decisions they made there. In some cases, in the north, the videos are tiny because the bandwidth is bad. So we need to be able to shrink it down, but we don't want to lose the original. And maybe in the south, you want to show the big version. So there's those kinds of decisions getting made in the back end. But there is quite a large, there's a large technology stack here. There's a lot of JavaScript on the client side, and there's a lot of Java on the server side, and there's even some JavaScript on the server side in the sense that the CouchDB's views there's sort of another view from a service point of view, types of things we can load in and use as a data source. So, JP said we've got only a couple minutes left, so I wanted to make sure you had time to ask questions. So, there's a book about all this, by the way, if you're interested. It's fantastic. But it's a little more on the social sciencey side, but it covers a lot of what we've been working on in terms of the work. But I think the goal, boy, was interested because this is a fairly intense piece of software. It's got a lot of applications. There's a lot of different people on campus using it. So we've got people across disciplines they're using this. You saw all the different types of things we're getting into. So things like trade and linguistics and health and obviously there's the geography stuff. And so as a platform that's around and that's open source and the team that built it is here.
We have fun. That's what I want to address is
Yeah.
the relationship between Nunaliit, computer science, software engineering.
Yeah, we have time. The room is available, and they're obviously
Are you guys
skipping
hungry?
class
You guys
anyway.
So JP is our lead developer. So
Will you put up Inuit places? So basically, what's Nunaliit's relationship with computer science or software engineering? And in your classes, you're probably going through, maybe some of you are taking graphic and figuring out how to raster some stuff. And there's a lot of libraries, and at a certain level, you've got algorithms that you're working on for databases and data sorting and all these things, right? And also, we're looking at an end product, right? And there's a big disconnection between the two, right? And if you go online and you look at open source projects, like if you just look at this one atlas, right? This portion of the rendering is done by an open source library called OpenLayers, right? Most of the stuff is layered using jQuery. We talked about D3 earlier on. There's caching and index DB inside the stuff, and so you go and say, okay, well, all these open source projects, when you do a map, the map is the center of the world. That's it, right? You get this package, and whoo, this is great. And this is what interests you. Jump into that open source project, right? And you can help, right? But the reality, going from all those disparate or disconnected projects to actually providing a solution to an end user, that's an engineering function, right? You're going from, okay, so we're talking about all those domain experts, linguistics. We're talking about the natives who want to map their world. We're talking about homelessness, right? You have a bunch of domain experts, right, who know what they want to do. They may or may not have data, right? If they have a story, often they don't have data. If they have data, they haven't figured out their story yet. But those are the domain experts. How do you go from what you've got to actually an end solution where your story is being told? So Nunaliit is this umbrella framework, which basically is an integration effort, where we take all these open source software or libraries, and we're trying to get back to them and say, you're not the center of the world, right? When I click on the map, somebody else has to be able to do something, and you have to be able to take, commands from outside saying, well, if I click something somewhere else, you have to react, right? And so you have to work with all these other open source packages and give them feedback. When Mozilla started SVG, and we started drawing all this SVG stuff on it, it did not work, right? How much money did we spend into getting back to Mozilla and giving them just problem report? Right? The opening of a problem report is expensive. You actually have to sit down there, describe the problem, how you repeat it, give them something so an engineer back there actually go and fix it.
If you're working with a complicated piece of software, it's hard to give them a test case that they can go and fire up. So you might have had to develop something, a dumbed down version that shows the problem.
Yeah, you can't give them a site like this and say, go click on this. So basically, what Nunaliit really provides is this umbrella place where everybody can plug in their algorithms or their ideas or their projects, and we actually help people, going from data to storytelling. Right? So there's room for a lot of a lot of places in there if you're interested in graphic and mapping and data sorting, all these things, right? All this is needed in there. So in the end, that's pretty much the message I want to send. If we switch now, like you see this is, you know, you saw a bunch of canned things, but this is working, right?
It sounds really good.
Yeah. So all this stuff. So if you're, the nice thing is it's multidisciplinary. So when you start working into this, you're going to end up interacting with domain expert and all sorts of stuff. And we've learned so much over the years, right? I did not know anything about linguistics before I started this, and I learned a lot about the native. You might want to, how about you put OBI and we'll wrap it up and ask questions. So, how can you work with us? It's like if you've got something, if you find these things interesting, if you have a story you want to tell, great. If you want to try it out, it's all open source, right? The other aspect as well is how do you make a living, or how do you make a project, right, with open source software? Like, you know, how do you give away stuff, right? And this is one of the issues. Like, each of those domain experts have a story to tell. They don't have a whole lot of money to put it out there. So initially we said, okay, this needs to be open source. This needs to be that, okay, it's an iterative development. Maybe that first community is able to give us some money to develop a feature for them, and the feature becomes available to everybody. And there's kind of a bit of a dynamic process that happened. Oh, well, somebody else sees this feature and says, oh, we're really close to what we want now, and we'll get money for this. And it's a lot. You know, you cannot expect like a huge company to broker like small contracts all the time. So you really need something like an open source framework, right? So that everybody can attach into it, and then basically they, you know, move the whole forward. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about.
Yeah, from a computing point of view, it's open source, but our model for development is open too, right? And we have partners that are all over the place. They're funding bits and pieces. You know, somebody will come up with a few grand to implement all the photosphere functionality, and then everybody will start using it. You know, the government of Nunavut pays to have a whole bunch of these, you know, widgets created, and some of the model view and all that. You know, the caching of objects in IndexedDB and stuff. And all of a sudden, there's 6 other projects that turn it on because it's helping them greatly. So that kind of community building is something that we're trying to do. And I think, you know, so put out a plug, you know, we're always looking for students to help us. We're looking for research assistants. You know, we do wind up with lots of sort of funded opportunities for, well, they typically tend to be graduate students, but I understand from Voya that there's probably an interest here at the undergrad level as well. But to get people working on something that, you know, where there's people that matters and that people care, and, you know, we're trying to do stuff on shoestrings, and we can use the help. So
I was also thinking of Nunaliit as a target of case studies in courses, but I haven't really thought this through. So, and to what extent it would be practical to put in the framework itself, let's say in the software engineering course, or an extension of it. Maybe framework itself is too much, but let's say in a mobile course, adding mobile apps, or the web, web course.
The mobile apps, the UI side of things, especially the table stuff. There's stuff that we want to do. Like one of the things in that talking atlas that we were looking at a second ago was, you know, one of the features that's on the to-do list. It's kind of a full stack feature. It's doing audio recording people on the browser side, right? So somebody in there doesn't have to record a sound file, get it onto their computer, try and format it properly and upload it. They just hit the record button. That stuff's possible now on the browser, but getting it to happen over a slow connection, streaming it to the server so the person doesn't have to sit there, taking it on the server side and integrating it with the data side. There's a whole path from the UI all the way through to the back end and back out again that needs to be factored in. So it's kind of
Doing some, oops, sorry. Not unlike the big blue button problem they faced with when they were debugging the web conference aspect. Because they were doing everything through the web browser.
And there's also some of the governmental clients until not that long ago needed IE6. So you need to bring this up in IE6 even though it was in degraded mode, right? And when you bring it up north, usually down here it works fine. Up north, you've got the bandwidth is so poor.
Yeah, we're running through a simulation proxy to simulate really crappy internet, and it's actually some of the people we're working with have crappier internet than the legacy modem settings in the software. That's the worst thing you can set in the software by default is not as they're not taking 2-second latency into account.
So there's a lot data compression, data cache, and all that stuff. So, anyway, do you guys have any questions?
I was a little bit curious about a couple of things, particularly how supervised the process of going from creating these new visualizations, especially looking at something like the OBI versus some of the other things. It's a drastically different interface, drastically different widgets and all these things. So kind of how supervised that process has to be, how much work goes from taking that generalized kind of schema model data and going into these very specific
So OBI, I think we went through 7 or 8 different visualizations before settling on that one. There's a lot of there's that intersection between the data is sort of figured out, and this is we got the 3 spreadsheets from the client, and we can sort of figure out how to organize that, but how you represent it and what's the story they're trying to get at, and it took a year of back and forth, and fortunately they were paying for it all, which is great. But you sort of work back and forth. You work through a number of different iterations, and each one had pros and cons.
Yeah.
Some things represent some things better than others, and you try to narrow it down to what is the main thrust of what you're trying to show here. And maybe if you're trying to show 3 different things, you need 3 different maps. Because sometimes when you try and cram everything into one visualization, it's not. You lose it all.
So when you look back in this OBI, there's only a finite number of pixels in the screen, and you're trying to push information through, right? And at one point you start overloading. You've got different colors, you've got different shading, and the reality is there's only so much information you can push. And at one point it gets too complicated. The human actually gets, So in this process, I can't say that it's completely agile. It's certainly an iterative process. Right? So from Amos's perspective, who's mostly dealing with the customer and having the pain of the customer, who says, okay, well, that's not what I want something somewhat different. Okay, what is it different? Right? You need to codify what they want. On the other side, from a development perspective, you're trying to put the tools in place to make it easy to switch from one to the next, so that, you've got a boundary object, I can modify it slightly, right? And then get to a conclusion. Different domain people will see differently. Some domains have already very complex data representation, so for them to be assaulted with a lot of data is okay. In other social science, well, it's not so much. You need a lot more sparse. Right? So it really depends on who you work, right? And the iterative process is important.
I guess kind of one of the things that prompts that refers to that question is the original, what it sounded like a lot of the original intent was getting away from working with data scientists for people who can't actually afford, or communities and things that can't afford to have professional data visualization done specifically for their application. So what sorts of things does Nunaliit offer to kind of branch that out a bit more for communities that need that specific or can't afford it? Or so how is this kind of bridging that gap that was originally small groups that wouldn't be able to afford those?
So I think that it's not providing the full bridge. This is obviously still a lot of work to develop. What we're doing, though, in terms of working with the same data sets and the same data set in a number of different contexts for the community. So they will typically have little projects trying to tackle different things. And so, data visualization is not, well, you saw it in the sea ice map. That was done through a research project. There was research funding to do that. That was a $400,000 research project that involved some of the, interviewing with people and collecting all the data and all that stuff. So a community is not able to do the bulk of that on their own. But once we get to the point where there's a tool that's been sort of built and established for them to then continue to be able to use, we translate into issues where how do you tweak that slightly to get more of what you want? Or how do you use the data I've used in there to do something else? So if I'm busy recording all of the sea ice terminology to create that visualization, when the linguist comes and starts asking about sea ice terminology, how do I avoid having to do all that work again? So that's a big part of it. There's also this idea that the ideas of what people want and what they want to do are a bit loose, right? They're loosey-goosey. This is not totally figured out. And many times, people will not necessarily know what it is. They know what the outcome is. They don't necessarily know what the step is to get it there. And so you want to be able to build a community of practice around something. And so Nunaliit is starting to do that. There are a number of, in the case of Indigenous communities doing work, there's a number of people settling on, place name mapping is a great place to start becoming familiar with the technology. And now that they all know and they're kind of they have the same kinds of needs, the same kinds of things, if we're able to implement some of those requirements so that they're not all having to reinvent the wheel, and that's a big help for them. It doesn't remove the need to still have somebody who's, in fact, if anything, it's not trying to remove the data visualization of the data scientist. It's trying to facilitate a connection to people like that. Because right now nobody in a community would come and say, I need a data scientist to help me visualize stuff. Right? And the data scientists wouldn't even be thinking about talking to the community. They'd be thinking about downloading the data from some site and making something cool, showing it at a conference, and moving on. So there's got to be an ongoing kind of living relationship that continues to evolve things. And having it be open source, having it be something the community can go and tweak if they need to. And we have partners that have different developers, and they're implementing things. We have folks that have integrated this with legacy systems because they've already done a project somewhere else where they've been, for example, collecting wildlife information from specific areas in the Bering Strait, and they need to be able to link it up. That system will not accommodate the multimedia, but they want to be able to have elder videos in there, and so they need to join it up. I don't know if that kind of gets there. Being a framework and being co-developed, I think, is something that is an overlooked thing for a lot of people. That development is not that waterfall development model of, I know what it is that I want at the beginning, and I'm going to build it, and I'm going to come out the other end with this thing that I needed, and the team is going to go away. It just doesn't work that way, and software developers have figured that out and moved to more agile processes and that kind of thing, a more ongoing iterative approach to development. And the communities need that kind of approach too, because their needs are constantly changing.
The need is much further from the requirements. I mean, from an engineering perspective, if you think of requirements, you say, oh, I need a road, right? Oh, so good. Right? But here we're starting from social science, which is much further than that. Before you actually figure out the need, you often need to put something in place, this boundary object, in order to interact with it, and start defining what those needs are, and start speaking the same language. From domain to domain, the language is completely different. So even though we're going still from needs to requirements, that chasm is much wider.
And we try to just do little steps at a time. I've got a project that's been going on 3 years, and we've been up for I've been up for 2 workshops. I've dragged JP along to the last one. The workshop, we went through this process. Okay, well, let's focus. Let's focus on a story that you want to work on. Okay, we want to work on a caribou story. Okay, great. So we're going to do maps focused on caribou. We're going to build data around that. We're going to try and come up with what it is that you need in order to document this caribou story. And then you get up to the workshop and they say, well, we brought 8 teenagers from around the territory to come and be part of this workshop, and we really want to focus on them. Okay, 8 teenagers, what excites you about caribou? Oh, we've never hunted for caribou, we know nothing about caribou. Okay, so today, so this workshop is no longer about caribou. It's about what do you know, Well, and I asked them, what are you interested in? Well, they're interested in money and girls. Okay, well, so so we can't really map those. That would be inappropriate. However, let's try and figure out where the common ground is. And so between the elders and the youth, it was let's work on what it is that we do know. Where do we go? And it turns out the youth knew a lot about the land. They knew where things were. They'd been out hunting and fishing. They knew where the cabins were. They knew all these travel routes. They started to have these conversations, and it took a day and a half to get it to that point, but then off they went. You saw one of the photos there, the elders and the youth, and they were pointing the maps, and they were doing stuff and everything, and the researchers can all just sort of sit back and off they go. If you can build a system that can do that, then that's great. And there's no caribou module yet. There's a bunch of data in the database about caribou that we had in preparation for the workshop, but the reality is that's not the priority changed on that day.
I suspect there is nothing comparable to the record. There is no comparable.
No. You guys need to go.
Yeah, I don't know. So if that's interesting, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, or you want to think about sort of interesting applications for what you're studying and how you might put it to use, or doing something other than I don't know, working for Google or something when you're out of here. That not that they're interested in this kind of stuff too, except we.
Well, I bet they are.
Oh, they are, but they have reasons for being interested in it. They don't necessarily.
They're nibbling at your cookie right there.
Yeah.
Or maybe swallowing the whole thing.
The issues, some of the things that we're dealing with around data sovereignty and that kind of thing really factor into. So we tend to, we have a love-hate relationship with Google. On one hand, they're making lots of things available and tools. Obviously, love our base maps. It's great to have Google Maps in the background, but the data has to live beyond some project manager at Google deciding to turn off something, right? Or turning off a service, or JP getting you got burned with Google Wave or something, when they decide they want to stop doing something, you need to be able to move it off of that. And one of our atlases, this sea ice, the maps used to have ice in them. Google Maps used to see the ice, and then somebody decided that bathymetry was more important, and all the ice got edited out of all the maps. Somebody went around with like a paintbrush tool, and I think it's been automated now, but it was pretty obvious at the time. It was like somebody had gone around and erased all of the water bodies and replaced it with bathymetry. Which, if you've got a sea ice atlas that's community and they're showing the travel routes across the ice, it's the ice changes, so it's not but it's a better representation than bathymetry. And so then it was like, okay, so what do we put in there instead? And so you do get thrown those curveballs. Anyway, but if you have any, if you're interested, or if you have any classmates or people you come across who are thinking about this kind of stuff, I'd love to bring you into the fold, and maybe if there's a way to do it through courses, that would be great too.
Yeah, it's going to take some work to put this in a form that's like projects that fit into courses, but definitely like for honors projects which are open, and a research project that's
any student that's interested in building like this, we've been having some time set aside each week to accommodate folks who want to come to the lab, work through something. Occasionally there's been plenty of student projects that use it in a particular domain or try to do something specific. In your case, it might be, we've had designer, human-computer interaction folks build projects based on user interface type modifications or changing how you interact with it. Obviously, there's been other types of people. We had a visiting student, a master's student from Mexico, who came up and spent a month in the lab and built an atlas, and then that was his master's basically when he went back. He graduated with, he got his master's with honors, I think, from that project, and and the community is actively using what he built. So you can, it can really jumpstart something.
Well, you
Because
see-
we're around.
See, an atlas for computer science being used. Like a course atlas, a TA atlas, a lab atlas,
Yeah, we only
actually
just
physical locations.
really recently started eating our own dog food with our own website. But
There's no potential in that view, it's terrible.
there's a list, if you want to explore some of the atlases, this is our website, so it's gcrc.com.ca. And you can find, we've been using Nunaliit for this, and we're still, this is our contribution to bits and pieces that we need, things like managing references and connecting them to various other things. There's a list of the publicly accessible atlases here as well, so if you want to go and look at any of the examples we gave and play with them, you can. There's many more in development, and some that aren't probably ever going to be shown publicly because they might be locked down into a particular user group.
Well, I can see also some of it becoming proprietary or closed, obviously.
Yeah.
So Tim is a math as well as computer science. So are there, I suppose there are obvious math aspects to this as well, geometry?
There are things that we wind up sort of hesitating to jump into because we don't have the math, or we don't have the stats, or we don't have, and so there would be places where there would definitely be a synergy there. One of the projects that we're written into, and I don't know what's happening with funding with that, is around visualization around climate policy and energy mix, renewable, and that's going to require quite a bit of visualization and interface, and obviously a whole bunch of math behind the scenes to come up with those models for really trying to present the what-if scenarios and scenario building for basically saying, if I did this, what would happen, how much would this be effective, and what would it cost, and that kind of thing. I don't know if it would go any deeper than that. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we've come across that's even deeper, but I'm not sure. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now.
I'd like to see that the government of Nunaliit is behind this a fair bit.
Yeah, so they're now sort of thinking that we're part of the team they need to fund going forward, which is nice.
Is that makes the tool itself as well as the data within sort of their.
We're trying to find as many different partners who can help look for funding. Right? We're a research shop. We're not a company. It's like being a company, but without any investors. Right? So you have to. Your investors are your users. And we have to be able to do something interesting. So, we've had people come and want to just produce something that we've already done. If they're willing to give us a lot of money, we'll do it because we can build things for other people. But it's at the point now where it's not really worth our while as a university research shop to take a small contract. If somebody had $5,000 for us to do something, it's almost too small to go and run it through the university and deal with the overhead and all that, and all of that. But there might be somebody who wants to build a simple site using Nunaliit. So we need to point them to people and say, okay, well, maybe these people can help you. Go download it yourself, or hey, we'll work with your web developer if you want to learn how to use it.
Maybe the computer science student is going to.
Yeah. So if we had somebody who knew what they were doing, then, yeah. But, or in some cases, you just know it's going to be a lot of work for not a lot of return. And you know that you can do most of what people are asking for already out of the box, but they're going to be designed by committee, difficult people to work with. Like, for example, another university that shall not be named that wanted to build something, and you're just going through the procurement process, and there's 7 people on the phone querying you about how quick you're going to be able to answer their phone calls when they want to make a change to a font. you're like, you know what, I think you need a different, you need someone else to help you with this.
But somebody could start a business.
Oh, yeah.
To do this.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Anything else? No? Okay.
Well, I think there's like lots of questions.
Well, you know where to
Maybe
find
I'll
us.
find them.
We're over in the Human Computer Interaction Building on the 3rd floor, so if you want to pop by or you want to shoot me an email, you can find me on here somewhere. It's like the cobbler's shoes, or this stuff is, I'm in here somewhere. I don't even have my email address on there. Anyway, if you're interested, look me up in the phone book. Oh, contact us. Ooh, look at that. There you go.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.